المجلة.
أسبوع جديد ولقاء جديد مع الماجازين الأسبوعي المجلة وأبرز النشاطات الاجتماعية الثقافية والفنية بالولايات المتحدة. نتصفح حلقة المجلة لليوم. لقاء مع النحات فارو. استخدام الأشعة الشمسية للطهي مع Solar Household Energy. تعد منحوتات فارو خارجة عن المألوف بتجسدها المواد اللي بتصنع منها، وبيميزها إلمام فارو بأدق التفاصيل. منحوتات عند رؤيتها عن بعد بتعطي صورة بتتغير عند رؤيتها عن قرب. رسائل قاسية بيحاول الفنان يوصلها من خلال منحوتاته بتتعلق بنظرته للحياة، للألم، للأديان، للحروب ومختلف الحالات الاجتماعية. كأننا لقاء مع فارو ضمن معرض ريجيم Change Starts at Home أو تغيير النظام يبدأ من الداخل، واللي نظمته صالة إيرفن للفن المعاصر بالعاصمة الأمريكية واشنطن دي سي.
I consider my audience to be human, and so they will read it, and I hope that it will influence them to think in a humanist way. And what I mean by humanist is the feelings about people, the kindness, the sharing. There's so many things of people treating people badly all over the world, and these are my concerns. I wanted to comment on the conditions people lived in the slums. I grew up in New York City, and that was my emotions. I was already successful enough to not live in the slums anymore, but I really felt about the conditions people lived in America, a very rich country, and so I worked a whole series of sculptures, 28, all about beggars. But not just beggars seeking alms, but beggars in all kinds of conditions in life where you might beg for your very life or anything else. So it was a really interesting situation. But that was my very beginnings, were social commentary, and I cannot I cannot abide by the way people treat each other. And that's what ultimately led me to doing anti-war art, you know, so I could get people thinking about it, about how they're treating each other. And that's basically the beginning of how I got into it. And the deeper I studied religion, and it didn't matter which religion, they all became institutes of power and control. And I recognized how much pain was caused by that. I've been aware for a very long time how religion has not just been something that people go to for solace and for a connection with God, but also that it's a power structure. It's an organization. Every religion is equally guilty in my mind. There's a good side to religion, and I really accept and honor that. But there's the other side, and that's the side I'm concerned with. And that people who profess to be religious and peaceful are supporting a system that's also supporting violence. And so that's what my involvement is in these pieces.
And thus your choice of material with the guns, the bullet, and as well as you get closer to the sculptures, you realize the details embedded in them. So how strong and powerful the message do you think that people get when they get closer to them?
Wow, this is very intentional from the artistic point of view. I try to make these as attractive structures from a distance, so that if somebody is coming in the room, they're attractive because there's a certain harmony and beauty in the architecture, and I subdue all the colors so that it isn't obvious what the materials are. I don't want that to be obvious until people get close. And so I try to manipulate the viewer in this way and control the way they access it. And as they do get close, because of the curiosity from the beauty, then they start to discover. So when you get close to these and you start discovering, oh, this is bullets, oh, this is guns here, you know, and so I make it quiet so it's not too obvious until you're close. And then even that, many people will not look inside, but inside there's more, and there's layers of things to discover. And what I'm trying to do is provoke them into thinking about the relationship between religion and war. And this, throughout history, how there was this link and this attempt to control, and if people don't give in, then they do it by force.
They're extraordinary objects that seduce you to look deeper at them, and there's this surprise factor. It's like, oh my God, here's these things that look like recognizable religious structures, but they're made out of guns and bullets and gun parts and steel and metal and human bone. And so this provocation of thought, of thinking about this relationship of war and militarism and violence that's embedded in the histories of all of our religions, unfortunately, and today provoking some of the strongest crises in the world that all of us need to confront and think about.
I have to be an equal opportunity person and criticize all the religions for their commonality.
You have criticized the three monotheistic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity.
Yes.
Are you planning on working with other religions in the future?
Yes, absolutely. I'm very shortly going to do Buddhist and Hindu. But my very next sculpture is going to be a bombed mosque, because I find it more than disturbing that, for example, the Sunnis and Shia are in conflict, and that they would actually bomb each other's temples. To me, that's a tremendous offense. And it's even between people of basically the same religion. They all, you know, worship the same God.
انتقاد الفارو للديانات عبر عنه من خلال استخدامه لأدوات الحرب، من قذائف ورصاص وحتى مسدسات، كونه بيعتبر أنه باسم الديانات افتعلت حروب كتيرة.
How did you get your material? How was it introduced to you as a medium, knowing that you hate guns to begin with?
Well, it was hard for me in the beginning because I wasn't comfortable. I found the material scary to start with. Having not been in the military and not been a sport shooter, I started doing Catholic reliquaries because my influence, the first came out of a trip to Italy when I was looking at reliquaries. And the actual reliquaries you'll see in churches, they often are small structures in gold or silver or something like that, and sometimes even covered with jewels. And so I'm taking off on that using a finger, and I call them all trigger fingers because it has that connection with the gun. Guns have a certain architecture in themselves, and so this adds the complexity that gives it a sense of a building. Shortly, I'd say 1 or 2 years after working with very Catholic imagery, I decided I really needed to expand into other religions. And I wanted to do it respectfully. I wanted to do it without offending. I'm sure people will be offended sometimes anyway because I can't control their sensitivity. So for example, this sculpture is a takeoff on a 9th or 10th century mausoleum of the Samanids in Uzbekistan. And it was a mud brick building of a similar proportion with columns in the corners. And so I'm using the real architecture, but I'm changing it because I'm translating the material from brick to bullets. I try to work with things that are that do exist, and then expand on it in my own way. This is actually a takeoff on a very famous synagogue in Florence, Italy. And I just researched and researched until I found something I thought translates well, again, in the same sense, for the materials I want to use. And so that was my starting point. And so I started with just this frontal part, and I used the same arches and doorways. And they had double columns, and I could translate that into 50 caliber machine gun bullets. And well, a sculpture like this took about 4 months, working 14 hours a day with 4 people. So I didn't do the math, but thousands of hours. I'm from a generation in America where we had this great idealism in the 1960s, in the Vietnam War era, and we did a lot of protesting and all that, and refused to fight. I was one of those people. I refused to go into the service. Some people would call me a coward, but I think there's a certain courage in standing up to that, and standing up to the government, and standing up to everyone and saying, no, I'm not a pawn in your game. I don't want to kill somebody. If we all say no to fighting, then nobody gets killed. I consider myself a spiritual person. I have respect for all religions and for people who make the choices. I don't have respect for people who go to extremes. I'd like them to think about the relationship and find the peaceful sides of the religion to exercise, and not to go to the extremes. I wish for peace. That's really all I wish for.
بعد الفاصل تقرير عن مؤسسة سولار هاوسهولد انرجي واستخدام الطاقة الشمسية للطهي لتوفير حلول للعديد من المشاكل البيئية والإنسانية. خليكن معنا.
المجلة.
مع الاحتباس الحراري والتغيير المناخي اللي عم نشهده حالياً، بدأ العالم يتجه لاستعمال موارد طاقة متجددة مثل الهواء والماء والشمس. وبما أنه الحاجة أم الاختراع، مؤسسة سولار هاوسهولد انرجي الغير ربحية بتحول الإشعاعات الشمسية إلى طاقة حرارية من خلال جهاز لطهي المأكولات بتوزعه بالمناطق النائية والاستوائية اللي ما زالت تعتمد على الحطب والفحم وسيلة للطهي. فبحسب إحصاءات منظمة الصحة العالمية، نص سكان العالم بيعتمدوا على الحطب للطبخ، وبيشهد العالم كل 20 ثانية وفاة شخص نتيجة لتنشؤ الغازات السامة اللي بتنتج عن حرق الخشب والفحم.
There are many benefits to solar cooking. There are limitations. The benefits are that you're using a free source of fuel. The sunlight is your fuel. It's available and clean. You can use it every day that the sun is out. And solar cooking is needed in those parts of the world where people are dependent on biomass. By that I mean firewood, charcoal, and dung for cooking their daily meals. The techniques they're using in those parts of the world where they cook with biomass are harmful to the environment. It causes deforestation. They're dangerous to the users because of the smoke inhalation. The World Health Organization has done research on this and says that 1.6 billion people are inhaling more smoke than is safe. It's like as if they were smoking 2 to 5 packs of cigarettes a day just by preparing meals for their families. It's most affects women in charge of cooking and their young children that will be nearby or on their backs. Especially these children develop pneumonia more easily because the particulates from the cooking fire lodge in the deepest part of the interior lung and you can never expel them. There are different kinds of solar cookers. One is called the parabolic that looks like a satellite dish. It's a focus cooker. You focus it to the sun perfectly and you can fry. It'll cook just like fire cooking. There's the box cooker. It's a box in a box with insulation between the two. This panel cooker is a hybrid between the box and the paraboloid. It consists of a reflector and a glass bowl with a black pot inside. This one is a more diffused light, so it will cook slowly. The big advantage is it won't burn. You can cook everything in here and you can use it also for baking bread and cakes. We developed it for a project in Mexico. It's got the advantage of it folds up, it collapses, and is easy to store. It has the advantage that it functions like a box cooker and that it won't burn your food. We're currently working with Tostan in Senegal. It's an NGO that was built up there about 25 years ago, working in 400 villages. We're working with 6 NGOs in El Salvador, and the biggest NGO that we work with currently is Mexico's Nature Conservation Fund that provides support in the form of funding and guidance to a large number of environmental NGOs in Mexico. About 12 Mexican NGOs have about 500 of these cookers, and they have trained their populations that live in protected areas to take care of the protected areas and stop deforesting them, and to use solar cooking, the solar oven whenever possible. Refugee camps in Africa are almost always put in the middle of a desert, so there's nothing to use for cooking meals. We knew that that was not a sustainable solution, and it was costly. Today, 12 years later, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and the World Food Program have to truck in food and firewood to allow these people to cook their meals. And of course, they provide water and the basic essentials. Today, 12 years later, we know about the catastrophe of Darfur, and we do have one area where about 100,000 refugees from Darfur have spilled over to Chad, and they're in 3 different camps, and 40,000 of them have a simple solar cooker, which is made out of cardboard and aluminum foil, and they learn to cook under the guidance of a nonprofit organization from Holland called COZAN. I think that's the biggest step an American could take, or anyone from an industrialized country, is learn to solar cook. It will give support to the rest of the world that needs the technology. This has saved so many lives, and it continues to do so.
مع سولار هاوسهولد انرجي بينتهي موعدنا لليوم. لمعلومات أكثر عن المجلة تابعونا على جروب المجلة على الفيسبوك. قبل ما أنهي الحلقة بقدم لكم لمحة عن نسخة المجلة القادمة. حلقة خاصة بالفنانين البيئيين كريستو وجان كلود نتعرف فيها على بداياتهم وأبرز أعمالهم. بتأمل الحلقة تكون نالت إعجابكم. لملاحظاتكم راسلونا على البريد الإلكتروني المجلة@الحرة.com، وأنا بلاقيكم الأسبوع القادم، وأكيد رح تكونوا على الموعد.
المجلة.